Turn up your radio. It's time for DeLorean Talk with your host, Dave Tavers.
Hi, and welcome to DeLorean Talk. This is episode number 14. Thanks for joining, as always. Today, I'm doing something a little bit different. This is a live in-person recording. This is the day before Thanksgiving 2017, and I became friendly with Chris Miles at the last DeLorean weekend in Las Vegas. It's a few months back. I was just overwhelmed and amazed at his level of experience and his passion and his interest and his knowledge. Really enjoyed talking to him and getting to know him. And over the last few months, as we've gotten to know each other, he said, hey, and when you're in the area, come by and I'll help you do some of the tweaks that you've been wanting to do to your car. So I got an invite to San Francisco area for Thanksgiving and said, okay, well, that makes sense to drive the DeLorean from Southern California up to the Fresno area and then continue on to San Francisco for Thanksgiving. So here I am sitting in the car with Chris Miles. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
Thanks for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed listening to it, and it's fun hearing all the different stories that we get to hear from all the different owners. And everyone kind of has their own story, and hopefully we'll be able to touch on a few of those things today.
Yeah. The interesting thing, other than just being a live recording, is partly for some soundproofing, but also because I thought it would be kind of fun. We are sitting in Chris's DeLorean in his garage while we're recording this. It reminded me, and I can't remember, it might have been, I can't remember who it was, but a few episodes back I was talking to somebody and they were sitting in their DeLorean doing the phone call. So it's nice and quiet in here, other than if we squeak on the seats. But so Chris, why don't you start by telling us your VIN number, how long you've had your car, just a little of the backstory that people usually ask you. Sure.
I have a 83 car. It was manufactured in August. The last numbers are 16409. And at a young age, I always had the idea of wanting a DeLorean. And I have memories of pretending I was driving a DeLorean at recess at school and things like that.
That's early.
And mostly thinking it was the time machine from Back to the Future. And then once I got older, like high school age, I started thinking about, what would it take to buy a DeLorean? And I remember at the time, DMC Texas had just kind of started real gung-ho with their internet sales. And back then, in 2000, 2001, they would have their build your own DeLorean page. And basically you could spec out the car how you wanted, and they would refurbish one and get it to you. And I would do that all the time and figure out what options I wanted and so on and so forth. And the funny thing was, I did it over the years, and when I first started, it's $25,000 restored. And then a couple years later it was $27,000, $32,000, and now they're wanting $100,000 for a car.
For a new, quote-unquote, new car.
Exactly.
How fun. I don't remember ever seeing or hearing about the Build Your Own DeLorean on the website. It's not there anymore, is it?
No, they took that down. I think for whatever reason, they're probably just not doing as many as they used to, and especially at the prices that they're asking nowadays.
Yeah. Geez, I don't know. I think they should put that back up. Sounds like fun, and they might catch a couple of future buyers by doing the same thing, just like they did with you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, when I was in high school, I seriously looked around at DeLoreans, and, wasn't really going to happen. So I got the next best car that I could kind of substitute, and I found a 1992 300ZX. And it was a cool car. You didn't see very many of them on the road in the early 2000s. For whatever reason, they're just kind of on the rarer side. I always wanted a unique car, one you didn't see around, so I didn't want anything that was common, like a Mustang or something like that. It didn't appeal to me. But having that Z car was really cool. It was probably the fastest car I've owned because...
Yeah, it's not a DeLorean.
No. But when I started making a little more money, I decided that I wanted to buy a new car because I didn't want to keep putting money into my Z. It was just one thing after another, and this was before I, was comfortable doing mechanic type work, and, it was a kind of a newer car. It had a lot of, systems and computers and things, and I wasn't comfortable working on it. So I said, well, I'm going to get a new car. So I said, well, I can get a new car for about $24,000. It's going to be something sporty. And so, I thought, well, what's available? So Hyundai just released their Genesis Coupe. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. There aren't very many of them around because it was new. And I said, well, I don't know. I wasn't sure. And out of the blue, I was having lunch with a friend, and there was a DeLorean parked in a local shopping center in Fresno. And all of a sudden, all of these old emotions about DeLorean started coming back because I kind of just written it off.
Right. Me too.
And I said, oh, that's right. I
want a DeLorean.
Yeah, I want a DeLorean. What's wrong with me? I haven't thought about it in a long time. And so then I started researching them again and finding out, what's what. And
about what year was this?
This has got to be like 2008, 2009.
Okay.
So I took pictures of the car and I saved it. And I started searching around and looking at some Craigslist stuff, eBay. And I found a car locally in town, and it had a turbo on it, and it was in rough shape. And I drove it. That was probably the first DeLorean I drove. And I said, well, I'm not going to do anything silly. I'm going to try to see if I can find something else. And searching on eBay, and one popped up. It had quite a few miles on it. It was like a 90,000 mile car. Oh. But
at that point, had you decided that you wanted to get a DeLorean instead of a new car? Like, was it going to be your daily driver?
It was going to be my daily driver.
Wow.
That's
commitment.
I couldn't afford to have two cars.
No.
So, and I was a grad student at college. I was teaching part-time for the biology department. So I was making about $1,000 a month. I was living at home. I said, well, I can live off of half of that and pay for a car payment.
Right.
So, looking at this ad, lots of detail about it, I ended up being able to contact the seller. And for the next several weeks, we talked on the phone, like every other day, just going over things.
Where was that seller
questions. He was in Los Feliz.
Oh, that's in L.A., yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Los Feliz, yeah.
Yeah, and finding everything about the car, found out that he was kind of technically the second owner. The car was owned by a woman, and then let her daughter drive it, and then this guy named Steve bought it, that I bought it from, and everything that I could think of. It's like, oh yeah, I've got tons of paperwork on the car, it's always been driven, and that was my main goal, finding a car that had been driven and maintained, not parked.
Yeah.
So having the miles really didn't matter to me.
It's kind of counterintuitive because you think, a lot of miles means more damage to parts in the car, but with the DeLorean, the longer it sits, the worse it is.
Exactly. So,
and everybody always says, you got to drive the DeLorean, and they like to be driven, and they're better when they've been driven, but there's still wear and tear on the DeLorean. But being such a unique car, yeah, I guess we know that if it's got a lot of miles, somebody has been driving it and maintaining it, so you're probably going to get a better car. People can disagree with that, and please write in and disagree, and then we can have you on the show, and you can talk. You can tell us why you disagree. But that's pretty good. So you got a car with about 90,000 miles?
95-ish.
Wow.
And so if you think about it this way, when you have a car sitting for 15, 20 years, and then some guy goes to start it, and then basically pumps a bunch of sludge into your fuel distributor and then screws it up royally.
Yep.
And then you're spending thousands of dollars replacing the parts. So that wasn't the case on this car. It had been regularly maintained by Don Steger down in Garden Grove when he had his shop. I got tons of paperwork on it. Took it for a test drive. A buddy and I went down to the LA area to look at the car. We went on like a Saturday, and
And how long is this from the time you saw the ad till the time you bought it?
I say
Weeks, months?
probably a month or so.
And so this was around 2008.
Probably more in 2009 when this particular car
This
I
car
found.
came
Yeah,
out. Because that seems like a long time for a month for a car, any good condition DeLorean to sit for a month and not get sold immediately. So I guess this was before the big boom.
And it was, like, to be honest, I paid $24,000 for the car, and it was running
$24,000 in 2009.
I mean,
with
it might have
95,000 miles.
It might have been high. It might have been too much, but
that seems low. But yeah, I don't know what the $2009 equate to today.
Everyone will say, "Oh yeah, I found one for this price. I found one for that price." But having the peace of mind that I went down and sat with my friend, drove it, gave him some money down. I said, "I'm going to come back next week and I'm going to buy it and I'm going to drive it home." He said, "Yeah, no problem. It'll make it."
Wow, nice.
So it was my daily car for the better part of 3 years.
Oh, in the Fresno area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, very fun. During that time, did you have to do any major maintenance on it, or was it more tweaking and just doing things you wanted it to do?
A lot of it tweaking, a lot of it upgrades. The big thing that happened shortly after I bought it was I was backing out of my garage and I heard this crack. And I said, "What is that?" I noticed when I was straightening out the wheel was off-center, going straight. I said, "What the hell is that?" I always had to go to work. I live real close to work, and so came back home. I got under the car. I looked at the suspension, and I noticed that the control arm had broken.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing that breaks, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I get into the car and I look, and the control arm had broke right on the ball joint area.
Oh, so the thinnest part of the metal.
The thinnest part of the middle.
Yeah.
So I said, "Oh, crud."
So there's no repairing that. That's
No.
not a weld job. That's a replace the
Right. So I
control arm.
had to send out and get some control arms.
Do you remember what you got? I mean, did you go do the aluminum ones, or did you get...
None of that existed back then, so I did
Oh.
the unapproved maneuver. I went and called John Hervey and had him send me a couple of refurbished arms and everything. And
What do you say, unapproved? What does that mean?
a lot of people have differing opinions about Specialty Auto.
Oh, got it.
At the time, he had the best deal. There was really not many other options, really. Josh Bankston really hadn't had his field tested yet. And a few years later, I decided I wanted to get new arms. So I had purchased some from a guy named Bern Henniger, who was a guy in Georgia who had DeLorean parts. And he made his out of really thick steel, and they're really beefy, so I put those on.
Wow, I've never heard that name. Never even seen it in writing anywhere.
So he had a business called Henniger and Associates. He did a small business. I guess he was known in the Georgia area. And he had a few cool products. The control arms, and he did a neat door strut bracket that I have in my car. And so, and at the time, again, when I got those, there wasn't really anything else that was new. They hadn't had the aluminum ones. Josh couldn't provide me a set of stainless arms. So I went with the next available thing. So, I mean...
Nice. And those are the ones that are still in the car today.
Yep. So that was the biggest thing that happened.
During those 3 years.
Yeah. The control arm broke, but the engine, if it's all been good, I did a tune-up on the car just because. New water pump. I wanted to put the lowering springs in the front to drop it down just enough.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And I got new shocks because...
Yeah.
I mean...
Doing it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. All the while you're in there type things that everyone talks about.
So, the lowering, because I've asked a lot of people, I love that look of that stance with the lower front end, but I've talked to a couple of owners who have done it and hated it because they end up scraping everywhere. I don't think those people went super low. I think they just went to the, what is it, 4 inches or something lower? What's been your experience with it?
I haven't noticed any terrible problems. It's not too low. I've seen DeLoreans that are slammed.
Yeah.
But these have a nice, just enough to bring it down.
Do you remember which springs you put in?
Yeah, so there's a guy named Martin in England. He has a small side business of some DeLorean parts, and at the time, he had some lowering springs made. He doesn't sell them anymore, but I would recommend giving Rob Grady or Ed Ouding a call in the Netherlands and getting a set of their front lowering springs. The rears are fine. You don't need to mess with them, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's overkill.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that was the first 3 years of having the car, and what happened after that?
It's been a good car. I mean, there's been times here and there that, I didn't have it for a few weeks. Luckily, I was able to still drive a car, to borrow my parents' car or something like that. But my goal was to do jobs that I could do in a weekend.
Sure.
And get them done and get back to school or get back to work.
Right.
And for the most part, that was the case. And I have 150,000 miles on the car now.
So you put around 60
Mm-hmm.
in 9 years?
Going on 9 years.
9 years.
Mm-hmm. I don't drive it as much as I used to drive it. Currently I'm a high school teacher, so now that I have money, I was able to buy a daily driver, and I was able to keep this DeLorean as a pleasure car. I drive it at least once a week. I feel bad if I don't drive it every week.
And what is your daily driver?
Currently, I have a 2014 Honda CRZ. I always want a car that you don't see a lot. Previous to that, I had a 1992 MR2, so I always kind of like the sportier cars.
It's sometimes fun to hear what people... Well, I've asked other people on this show, because it's like, is the DeLorean the fun sports car, and the other one is a Cadillac or a pickup truck, or is it another sporty car? Right. So
I loved owning the DeLorean and MR2 at the same time, because I could say I had two mid/rear engine cars.
Yeah.
And that was a neat car. But again, it was old. It was a 92, 93, and I wanted a car that had modern amenities in it, and
right.
one that wouldn't require me having to fix. I already have this DeLorean to fix, so I didn't want to have to mess around with another old car.
So since or during those 3 years or since then, have you basically done every tweak that you want to this car?
I'd say so. I'm kind of running out of things to do to it. I mean...
I can see, because again, we're sitting in the car, I can see that you've got a dash cover. So the binnacle's covered, and it looks like this was made for the DeLorean.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you had this on?
It's a funny story. So when I went to go look at the car the first time...
Back in 08.
Back in 09. I gave the guy a deposit, and I said, well, could I take the dash cover and the keys with me? And he said, sure, take one set of keys. That's kind of like this is your car now.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So, yeah, I've had the dash mat since I've owned the car. It came with the car.
You took the dash mat the week before you actually picked up the car.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's saying the other one, but I thought I got to have proof that I'm getting this car.
And I can see that you've got an Alpine aftermarket stereo in the car.
That came with it.
Oh, it was already in, so you did not do that. What other tweaks have you done over the years?
Well, one of the big things was I removed every piece of trim pretty much on the car and re-dyed it.
The exteriors?
All of the door panels.
Oh, the interior
console,
trim.
Yeah.
Oh, and you re-dyed everything. Mm-hmm. Wow. I didn't notice. I couldn't tell.
It's kind of a nice color, and I think it's held up pretty well.
Yeah. So, because I got to know you a little bit at DeLorean Weekend, that was not... This car that we're sitting in is not the DeLorean that you drove to DeLorean Weekend. You are one of the, I'm going to say few, owners that have two DeLoreans.
That's correct. That's a whole other story. One that I didn't think would happen. It's kind of a sad story, but it's kind of a neat story. Over the course of my ownership, I came to know a man named Ken. And he was just like every one of us who wanted a DeLorean. He was a kid when they came out. He was like a teenager, I think. And he told his mom, I'm going to buy one of those cars. His mom said, no, you're not. And so, obviously, he didn't buy one when he was younger, but when he was, I guess you could say his midlife crisis, he decided he's finally going to buy a DeLorean. And Ken's a very eccentric man, and he didn't want any DeLorean. He had to have something stand out.
Yeah, because the DeLorean doesn't stand out enough.
Exactly. So he wanted to get a painted car. So he found a guy locally, actually, in the Fresno Clovis area that had 2 DeLoreans in his private garage.
Another one, okay.
And he had a service shop, and he did work, and somehow he got working on DeLoreans, and Ken saw that he had a red painted DeLorean was advertised, and so he lived in Visalia, and he came to look at the car, and he saw both cars. He saw the silver one he saw the painted one. He says, well, I'm getting the painted one. So he buys the painted one in around 2008, and I got mine in late 2009, and over the course of maybe, I don't know, a year later, I met Ken. We went to a car show together.
You met at the car show?
Yeah, I met at the car show, saw his car, and we didn't talk about this, but one of the reasons why I bought a DeLorean was because I found a local owner in Fresno who had one, and that was kind of a bargain I made, that I needed to have someone who knew a little bit about the car, have someone around to help me with it.
Yeah.
Because there was no way I was able to afford the maintenance at a shop.
Yep.
So my friend Ryan, he had his car for quite a few years when I had gotten mine already. And so Ryan had kind of introduced me to Ken as well, because we were all at the same car show together. After that, we were inseparable pretty much. We did all different car shows together. He was always, calling me up, talking this and that, and this is what I'm going to do next. He always had something to do on his car, and unfortunately, tragically, he had a heart attack, and he didn't make it. And went to his funeral. A couple other DeLorean owners showed up because they knew him, and he and I had went to DeLorean weekend. The first time that I went, I think it was in 2014. So I took my silver car, he took his red car, and like the next year he passed away. And then another DeLorean weekend happened, and I didn't want to go because it was kind of I went with Ken, so that was kind of like,
that was your connection.
Yeah,
a good connection.
Yeah, so kind of like just there wasn't anything else I could do. I didn't really think about his car all that much. My friend and Ryan and I went and kind of had one last send off with his car. We drove it around the block and kind of repositioned it in his garage so that you could get another car in there. And that was kind of it. And then early, let's say maybe March, April of 2017, I get a notification that a red DeLorean has been listed for sale in the Visalia, California area. And I said, what's going on here? And we find out that an attorney is listing property for sale. And I said, well, they must be doing, like his inheritance or something like that.
Oh, right.
And so I get a hold of the lawyer and said, Ken didn't have a will, and the state is going to sell all of his property to recoup some costs.
Oh, wow.
His family was kind of, they weren't going to be able to keep anything because he had bills to pay and creditors. So after I talked to the lawyer, I actually get a hold of Ken's parents. So I took my friend Ryan, and we went over to talk to Ken's parents, and daughter was there. And we said, we were good friends of Ken. His daughter asked, were you at the funeral? And we said, yes, of course, we were there. We had our cars there. We brought our DeLoreans to the funeral. And he says, oh. I said, well, what are you planning to do with the car? He says, well, we can't keep it. We can't buy it because all the property has to be sold. I said, well, what if I buy it? And we talk about it, and they really like that idea because
somebody who loves it and loved Ken.
They couldn't bear to see the car just sitting in their garage.
Or get sold off to somebody that didn't appreciate it. Or, have a connection.
So they didn't care to make any kind of profit for the state. So we negotiated a price that we were all comfortable with.
Nice.
And I paid them the money. I spent a whole day at Ken's parents' house going through the fuel tank, cleaning it out, and was able to drive it. It hadn't been driven in 2 years. Started right up.
Nice.
Took it home.
Wow. So, wonderful story getting to kind of carry on a legacy of someone that clearly loved the DeLorean.
Mm-hmm.
Your first experience with DeLorean weekend, and now you are one of those few people that have multiple DeLoreans, and in your case, both of them run very well. I saw it. I saw the red one at DeLorean weekend, and now I've seen your silver one. And it's funny, in talking to you, you often will say, my silver car, my red car.
Yeah. I have a kind of a running joke. We call it Big Red because Ken called himself the redheaded stepchild of the group, and he had a big personality.
And that red car, it is not just a painted car. It is super customized.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that you have not made any major changes to it,
at
least visually.
No visual changes, no.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of tweaks that I've done on my silver car to that car just to make it better.
Easier to maintain or drive better.
As a matter of fact, on our way back from DeLorean weekend with Ken, he ended up breaking down outside of Barstow, California. He tells me about it. Yeah, I had to call a tow truck, and I kind of told him a few things. This and this, check that. And I said, there's this thing called a hot air dam that you put in front of the fuel tank, and all the air, the radiator fans, is directed down underneath the car, and it doesn't heat up the gas. That was like a problem. If the gas got too hot, they would build up pressure, and the fuel pickup would collapse.
Oh, wow. Was a problem, meaning that's been resolved now somehow?
Well, now that we have these new integrated fuel pumps,
all
of that old equipment's out of there. So
okay, got it.
And I wanted to make sure that was done, and I did a few things before I took the red car back to DeLorean weekend. I did a tune-up and.
So when he broke down, you told him to check that, and was that the problem?
Yeah, because he was able to start it again and everything. And,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, again, this is where I've said it, I've talked about you to several people, and I say you're young. I just turned 43. You're a bit younger than me. The knowledge you have on so many parts of the car is impressive and awesome. There's lots of people that know tons about the car, but you really do a lot of work to your cars, and you know components and pieces, and when I talk to you, you know about all the parts. I mean, you're definitely not one of the normal owners that I've talked to. And normal owners I've talked to, they might change your oil, but they're not doing a lot of the major things that you've done on your own. Most people like me, I think, are dropping it off at a shop and getting it fixed. So I think you're kind of unique in that you're doing so much of the work on your own. And
it was really on-the-job training, and not willing or wanting to pay some garage in my town to learn how to work on the car.
Yeah, when you can learn on your own, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm assuming then you drive your silver car more than the red car.
I try to drive it one of them every
week.
Every week.
Got it.
Yeah.
What is the furthest you've driven one of your cars away from home?
So, in 2014, I went to DeLorean weekend in the silver car, so that was pretty far. I drove my car.
That being Vegas. So Fresno to Vegas is what, 5 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
5.5 hours.
5.5 hours.
Of course, I drove my car from LA to Fresno when I first got it.
Sure, which is about 4.5 hours.
Mm-hmm. And I've been back to LA a couple times in my car, and the red car I took to
DeLorean weekend
DeLorean
a few months ago.
Yeah. When Ken had the car, he went to DCS '09.
Was it Ohio?
No, that was in Vegas too.
Oh, that was Vegas. Okay. So that's your longest trip in either of the cars, really, is Fresno to Vegas.
Yeah, I think so.
Got it. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, that so far this was my longest drive, going from Southern California, Orange County, to Fresno. And I'm sure this probably does sound cheesy, but the tagline for DeLorean back in the 80s was "Live the Dream." And we've seen it posted all over in the forums, and it's one of those things that's still around. And I remember it 20 plus years ago when I first saw the car and wanted to get one myself. And I drove my DeLorean from Orange County to Vegas twice, and I've driven it all over to San Diego and Los Angeles and all over Southern California. I've been loving the car. I've had it almost 2 years now. But this trip, driving north to go to San Francisco for Thanksgiving, is the first time I was between LA and Fresno, and something suddenly clicked as I'm driving down the road. And again, this is the cheesy part. All of a sudden I went, wow, I'm living the dream. Because, kind of like you, with you're talking about at recess pretending to drive the car.
Right.
I remember lots of times. I love driving. I've driven back and forth to LA and San Francisco dozens of times. And the number of times that I have thought about doing exactly what I was doing yesterday is driving the DeLorean someplace other than, just nearby. I can't believe it. The first time it really hit me, kind of choked me up a little bit, going, I can't believe I finally achieved this goal or this dream to be driving the DeLorean. And it's been running great. For me, the temperature gauge was just pegged at that first mark and had the AC on, and it cruised great. So that was really exciting to have that experience and have that feeling, and just makes me more happy and excited to have the car and share it with other people.
Definitely. And it's always good to have a trouble-free motoring experience in the DeLorean.
Yeah, most of growing up, I had crappy cars that broke down all the time, so I've been stuck on that same trip multiple times. I also I want to say thank you sincerely, as if I haven't said thank you enough, but as I've whined about and cried about, while I know plenty of owners in Southern California, I don't have anybody that's nearby that has your experience to, I'll say, motivate me, get me off my butt to actually do some of the tweaks. And you have been so awesome today, helping me do the little things to my car that just, make it a little bit nicer and fantastic. In the short amount of time, what we got accomplished. I'm embarrassed to say, like I said, I've had the car almost exactly 2 years, and I've had a bag of stuff that I've been collecting that I've been wanting to put in the car. I bought a kit from DMC California, the whole exterior stainless steel screw kit, and I bought the exterior LED lights. Rob Grady sold me the last little piece of trim that was missing off of one of my the door jambs. All that stuff has been sitting in the car for a year and a half, and I've just been really busy. I love the car, but I haven't spent the time to do it. In a couple of hours, you helped me do all those things and way more. We got all the screws in, finished installing all the last of the LED kit on the outside, so now I have all exterior LEDs. I had bought a LED kit for the back of the center console panel, and
right.
You knew exactly everything they were doing. You just jumped right on it. You knew exactly what we were doing. There was no thinking about it, trying to figure it out. Now I've got the LEDs in the center console. What else? I finally put the stainless steel letters in the bumper.
Right, those turned out really nice.
Look good.
And you got some new front speakers for the car.
Yeah, finally. So I bought new rear speakers, again, probably a year ago, but as most people know, replacing rear speakers is sketchy, because if you break those plastic panels, you can't get replacements.
Right.
And I've read lots of articles, but I still haven't replaced those. And I recently, I think I talked about it on a previous episode, I recently upgraded my original ASI radio, thanks to Dimitri in France, to a Bluetooth ASI radio Same exact radio, it just has a flip switch goes between the two. So now I've actually been listening to music in the car when I'm driving, and the front two speakers just, they just sounded buzzy and bad. And again, thanks to you, you just crawled underneath there, got the nuts off, and I bought new ones, $36 from Amazon for a couple of Pioneer two-way 3.5-inch speakers. When you pulled out that first speaker, that was kind of a crack up.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't expecting it to be so bad, actually.
The entire outer ring of the paper cone was just gone. It just had
deteriorated years ago.
Yeah, years ago. It sat in a garage for 27 years, so it was completely gone. And like you said, I was surprised it still worked.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it would have sounded, as, I guess, good as it did, but
yeah.
Sometimes you just have to take something apart and just go at it, and sometimes you run into a snag, and other times, you get over it or get around it, and,
We learned that today, too.
Yeah.
So putting in the new speakers, we went from the original front speakers were 15 watts.
It's kind of comedic, actually, if you think of that.
It is, yeah. To go back, 1983, 15 watts was acceptable. And these new ones, like I said, $36. These are 60 watts each. So, pretty exciting to... we tested it, but I haven't driven with them yet, so I'm excited to get on the road and hear how they sound. Even though the crappy 15-watt, 35-plus-year-old broken speakers sounded just fine for me driving north. What else? Oh, yeah. Oddly, in putting on that one little last piece of trim, all of a sudden you're like, oh, look, this piece is loose too. And so is this one. And look, this is loose. There's so many pieces of trim around the door that were just sitting there. They weren't even stuck anymore. You just picked up the one on the passenger side. It's crazy.
So since we were using some adhesive on the little tiny section, I said, well, let's just, finish off this tube because it's just going to go bad anyway, and we'll just reglue it all. We got some tape and held it in place, and overnight came out perfect.
Yeah, it just looks fantastic.
And normally you see these outer door seals on these cars that just get rotten and cracked, but yours are in good shape. There's no reason to replace them.
Yeah. In fact, thanks to, I think, Mark Bouchard in Arizona, a little over a year ago, he had redone the seals on his trunk lid, and I really liked it. So I ordered those, and again, they sat in the box unopened for over a year, and I thought, oh, maybe we could take a look at it. I opened up the box, and then you went and looked at the seal, and we're like, it just needs a little glue here just to get it back onto the hood. Same thing, used the last of that tube and got it on there, and now I've got the original trunk seal that seems to be standing up pretty well.
It's not cracked or anything. It would be way more labor intensive to take it off and put a new one on. So
yeah. Thank you so much for all your help. Unfortunately, I didn't take pictures along the way. I feel like we were just go. I totally forgot to take pictures, but I'm going to take some pictures and do a couple of write-ups and add it to my car website, which is dmc10515.com. I've got some other stuff up there, but I'm going to include all the little things that you helped me with today. So that was really fun.
It's always fun to be able to help someone else out on their car. In my experience, besides my friend Ryan in town, like other owners that I've met over the years, they just didn't quite seem into doing anything with their cars.
Really?
Yeah. And Ryan and I have kind of done most of everything on our car, so we're running out of things to do.
Well, lucky for me. I mean, 4.5-hour drive is not too bad, but who knows? I might have to hit you up again. I know I need to replace the fuel lines. What you just made the comment that you don't have many other owners. Is there a club here in this area? Do you know many other owners? How many other DeLoreans are in the area? And I say in the area, I mean, this is, Clovis, so, I don't know, 20, 30-mile radius?
There's probably around 5 that are in the area. And do
you know all the people, or you just know that there's about 5 in the area?
I think we know everybody. Most of them aren't driven. My friend Ryan, he and I drive ours probably the most. There's 2 other cars that are drivable, but we don't have a lot of owners around here. That we just kind of have an unofficial club. We don't do anything official, and I mean, I would like to be able to try to get more interest and maybe try to get some of the guys from Northern California to come down and do a car show with us.
I know I've seen the NorCal Club online. How far away are they? Are they? Is it NorCal like way north, or is it San Jose north?
It's like San Jose, Davis, Sacramento, all of that area.
That's a big area.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So have you driven up there to do any events with them?
Yeah. A year or two ago, Rob Grady flew out from New York, and he set up shop at a local garage, and he was doing $50 inspections. So my friend Ryan and one of our other friends who lives in Colorado, he was on leave from the Air Force, so he came back home to visit, and we drove up to San Jose area, and we spent the day talking with the owners. There's probably about 15 people that showed up.
15.
So Rob was working all day doing the inspections, and he then set up subsequent trips to come up and fix some of those cars.
Nice. Did you have him check your cars?
Yeah, he checked my car, and
did he find anything?
Nothing critical. He mentioned that there's some spots on the front frame extension that could use some epoxy at some point, and so
he just found the same thing on mine.
Oh yeah. So nothing that critical that I need to do right away. But it was fun to be able to meet him, and then I got to see him again at DeLorean Weekend this year, so that was fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, anytime that I can, meet up with owners, it's always good to, look at their car, see what they did, share what I've done, get them excited about driving their car and not just letting it sit around.
Yeah, not just having it be a garage showpiece.
Mm-hmm.
As I talk to more people, in fact, you and I were talking earlier tonight, and it kind of struck me that we all know there's lots of DeLoreans around, but the number that are just parked in a garage or some out in the backyard, unfortunately, they just sit there. And I can't imagine that people who own those want to leave them in that condition. So I wonder why people leave in that condition. Do you think it's a financial thing? Do you think people just don't want to spend the money it's going to take to get them running again?
It's very bizarre. Sometimes I think it's, I'm keeping this car forever and it's going to be worth millions of dollars, or they're content to leave it the way it is. They have no desire to get it running again. I don't know. It's very weird. The DeLorean ownership is, I'm all about keeping the car on the road, and other people's just, life gets in the way. And
I think about that sometimes. Again, I'm a newbie, but I thought, boy, what happens if I have some major problem with the car and it's going to cost $5,000 to fix it? Am I gonna pony up that money, or is it going to sit in the garage for 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years? What's going to happen? So I love the car. I would drive it more if, well, I feel like I drive it a lot. I think I just did the math, and in just under 2 years, I put about 9,000 miles on it.
That's pretty good.
See, that seems pretty good.
For a non-daily driver, most people drive 10,000 miles a year in their daily cars,
right.
A little bit more than that.
Yeah. So I did half that, yeah.
So that's fine.
And I'd, back and forth to Vegas twice, basically. So I think, well, I'm driving it more than I think a lot of people. But LA kind of helps because it's, there's just a lot of area out there. Do you have any fun or crazy stories since you've had the car? Whether it be while you were driving or at a car show?
People always ask, like, "Oh yeah, can you score chicks in a DeLorean?" And it's most of the responses, no. Mostly it's like young kids and old dudes. But I can say that I did get a couple dates from a girl because I owned the car. But she was a bit older than I was, so the car was more relevant to her than girl my age was.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. So you're what, early mid-30s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty funny. So do you remember, how did she find out about the car? Did you mention her, or did she see you in it?
This is it's almost out of a movie almost. So again, my friend Ryan and I took our cars to like a trendy part of town that has lots of bars, and it's like the hip scene in Fresno. It's called the Tower District. And so we pulled up in front of a bar, and we were trying to find parking, and like the owner or like the head bartender came out and said, "Hey, park these cars right here in front, right by the patio."
Yep.
And so we did, and so there was like some kind of like party going on. Someone was having a party at this bar, and I just struck up a conversation with this girl, and it's just kind of interesting. But that's probably like
one of the very few stories out.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting to get that either.
Yeah, well, I don't know that anybody expects that. I honestly don't think I have heard anybody any guys that have picked up a woman because of the car, because of the DeLorean. But you're right, tons of kids and families and old guys.
Yeah.
Any other fun stories or experiences?
Over the course of ownership, I've started to kind of get a bunch of spare parts that I want to have on hand, just because I know some of these things are going to be available.
Yeah.
And so now that I have a second car, it's like compounded. I say, oh great, now I have to
two more of everything.
I have to get 2 more of everything. It's like I got 4 Rubbermaid bins of parts up in my spare bedroom for when the dark days when DMC California or DMC Texas no longer exists. Because if you think about it, I'm 33 now. In the next 20 years, I'd still want to own my cars. What's it going to be like?
Yeah.
And it's only getting worse because fuel injection components they're going to get older and so on and so forth. So whenever I find a deal, I pick up some parts and keep them.
So at some point in the future, I might be able to call Chris Miles for parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, before we go, I often ask this question, and I always explain because I have too much junk in my DeLorean trunk. So what do you have in your silver car and your red car?
Well, I alternate a tool bag in between both of them.
Depending on the one you're driving?
Depending on the one I'm driving, yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes I have a chair that I keep in there for a car show or something like that.
I learned that early on.
Yeah. Sometimes I have some like memorabilia, like signs or stuff. But I try to keep my trunks pretty empty just because I want to keep everything neat. But I also make sure I have like a spare alternator belt in case I throw one off.
Good idea.
And I got some, spare fuses and relays and things like that. Because you never know, like extra wire or something like that, just in case.
At some point, I think I'd like to work with you more because, again, you have some great knowledge that you've been willing to share, and being able to figure out what relay went bad is pretty useful. So I might have to beg you to write some articles for DeLoreanDirectory.com and share some more. Because I think that, didn't Ron break down on the way back from DeLorean weekend?
He did, yeah.
And you said, check the
relay?
Check
this and this, yeah, and we figured it out eventually. And fortunately, he had to get a tow home, but...
Yeah, well, because he didn't have the spare
Yeah,
relays,
exactly.
Right? Well, again, Chris, personally, thank you for helping me with my car, but also thanks for being on the show and sharing your experiences and your DeLorean stories. And I am excited to get to know you more and keep talking to you and get some more of your feedback in the future.
Sure.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening. As always, please go check out DeLorean Talk on Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter and all the social media platforms. If you have any feedback, comments, ideas, questions, you want to be on the show, send an email to comments@DeLoreanTalk.com. Also, please go check out the DeLorean Census on DeLoreanDirectory.com/census. Share the information about your car or any of the cars you see publicly so we can kind of get a better count of how many are left out there. And thanks again for listening.